I'll tell you what. We've had a cold open for all of the previous episodes. The last cold open for last week's was both of us saying we didn't think that a cold open needed to be a part of a format.
We don't think a cold open needs to be part of the format, but I guess it just is now.
No, that's true. So welcome everybody to, what's the name of this podcast?
Wasting away again, away again. Wasting away again, away again. Wasting away again, away again. And Margarita the Pill. It's long damn fall.
Hi, I'm Tom.
I'm Kyle. We have a guest with us.
We have a guest.
Hello,
This
I'm
week.
Mayim.
We are discussing Jimmy Buffett's December 1974 album, his second one of 1974. He had a prolific year, A1A.
This is an interesting episode for a couple of reasons. We also need to mention that we are recording for the first time in person together, as opposed to over the internet.
We are recording in the decommissioned wing of a still active church. I had to get permission that we could specifically mention Jimmy Buffett in next to hallowed halls. On the other side of us, also in the decommissioned wing, is a preschool, which is fortunately not in session today because the walls are thin and there is a single pane glass door right behind us.
Yeah, that would be an issue. But before we get started, I want to ask Kyle, what are you listening to recently?
So I was listening to my driving playlist on the way over here. I don't need to bore everyone again with that. I'm into the ends.
Oh, okay.
What I was with the last song that came on was Night Owl by Jerry Rafferty, which is who I was going to talk about anyway because I have been listening to him.
Oh, okay.
Because I don't remember how it is that I was reminded of his 1978 album City to City, but I was, and so I went back and listened to that. I mean, the big ones off that are Right Down the Line, Baker Street, and everything. But that whole album is just really good.
I'm not familiar with it. I'll have to find it at some point.
Yeah, it's great.
Before I go, Mayim, what have you been listening to recently?
I've been listening to Kikagaku Moyo. They're a kind of South Asian folk and 70s rock inspired psychedelic group. And then I've also been listening to a lot when walking around town, Asaphale, which is a wonderfully evocative show with a bunch of horror one-shot short fiction.
I've been listening to a lot of podcasts about Magic the Gathering this past week. And when I haven't been doing that, I've been driving around with my younger sibling, who is obsessed with Ghost. So I've been listening to a lot of Ghost. So I've had an interesting week.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Regardless, today we're here to talk about Jimmy, of course. Now, at this stage, Jimmy's career has started to become more of a real thing.
Oh, you want to get into the context? I have a whole page on.
Please go on.
All right. So, A1A was released in December of 1974. He'd released Living and Dying in 3/4 Time in February. He was recording this still in Nashville at Woodland Studios. It was done in August, I think. This is his last album that was done for Dunhill because the Rancho Deluxe soundtrack was a soundtrack release on United Artists. They do soundtracks. And then Dunhill became defunct in 1975, so that's when he was moved to parent label ABC, which of course then made him label mates with a band, one of my favorites, very much different vibe entirely, but then Jimmy Buffett with Steely Dan made him label mates with Steely Dan. So the context here is that Living and Dying netted Jimmy Buffett his first hit with Come Monday. It hit number 30 on the Billboard, 58 on the country charts, and the big hit, number 3 on the easy listening charts. Jimmy spends the entire year touring. He tours every month out of the year. He essentially takes almost a full month break in July. He performs on July 4th. We'll get to that. But apart from that, he performs every single month. He did 36 live shows in 1973. In 1974, he did 105.
Jeez.
This was an acoustic band that was just him and Roger Bartlett on guitars. Roger Bartlett wrote one of the songs on this album. He's not a member of the Coral Reefers yet. He's just a touring guy.
Okay.
He's going to join the Coral Reefers for the next album. And he'll be part of the inaugural class of the officially formed touring group, the Coral Reefer Band. Because at this point, it's just a bunch of studio musicians in Nashville are being called the Coral Reefer Band and a couple of Jimmy's friends. Some of them will cross over into Jimmy's touring band, but they're not officially a band yet.
Yeah.
So I just want to go through. Jimmy's mostly opening up for some acts throughout the year. I'm going to just give you a little run through of who he was opening for because it's quite an eclectic mix.
Okay.
So in Atlanta, Georgia in February of 1974, he opened for Billy Joel.
Okay.
Let's see if you can wrap your mind around this. In March of 1974 in Houston, Texas, he opened for Frank Zappa. An easier to understand one, in LA in April, he opened for Hoyt Axton, who's just another singer-songwriter. Bangor, Maine in May, he opened for Three Dog Night. Also in May, in New York, he opened for the soft rock band Orleans.
Okay.
And for David Allen Coe, which is, I think, particularly ironic.
Oh, goodness gracious.
He did a co-headlining show at Grand Valley State University in Allendale, Michigan, with the band Cabbage Crick, whom I know you've never heard of. They were a band formed at GVSU the year before. They were sort of a bluegrass rock mix.
Okay.
So he performed at Willie Nelson's 4th of July picnic in College Station, Texas on July 4th. Records A1A in August in Nashville. And then he recorded his act for KSAN-FM at the record plant in Sausalito in October of 1974. So A1A is not as successful as his previous albums because The Pirate Hit Looks at 40 only hit number 101 on the Bubbling Under chart. And then Door Number 3 climbed to number 88 on the country chart. That's the biggest hit from the album.
That's unfortunate.
And then the album, the album itself hits number 25 on the Billboard, which is way up from Living and Dying, which was 176 on the Billboard.
Yeah.
So it was moderately successful. It didn't have a big hit. So I guess now we'll get into the songs.
Yeah, so this album opens on a cover. It opens on a cover of Making Music for Money, which was originally written by
Alex Harvey.
Alex Harvey.
He wrote it for Kenny Rogers in the first edition.
So there's something that's going to come up a little bit later. We've talked a little bit about Jimmy as a covers artist before. The A side of this record has 3 songs on it that Jimmy didn't write, and I think there's a reason for that. But for right now, I think this is an interesting song for a number of reasons. You know, luckily I don't think that this is egregiously unfitting of Jimmy's voice. I think musically this is okay. I think that lyrically it's a little bit interesting. It makes me wonder if, obviously, later in Jimmy's life he becomes a much more commercial figure. And there's part of me that wonders, like, when you have an artist this prolific, do they eventually start phoning it in, or do they always love writing that music? Did Jimmy love making Hot Water, for example? Like, and I guess that's something we'll have to do a judgment call for. I'm going to be thinking about this song for quite a while.
So I want to talk a bit about album tropes for what I think it was either Ray Manzarek or Robbie Krieger of The Doors had mentioned about their first couple of albums.
Yeah.
That your first album, once you're signed to a record label, you have 25 years to write that album. Your second album, you have 10 months to write.
Yeah.
By your third album, like if you're lucky, your second album is at worst like an inferior version of the first album because it includes a bunch of like songs that didn't make the cut on the first album. By the time you get to your third album, you've run out of ideas. As you're adjusting to having to put out an album at this time once a year. That's not the norm in the music industry anymore, obviously. The other part I want to point out is that it's actually pretty common for musicians to have the first couple albums be sort of their original like wellspring of ideas, and once they get to the dregs of that, they start drawing on real-life experiences. And that real-life experience is almost certainly the grueling touring schedule they're doing, and how much they regret that life, like how much they hate it. I think this is Jimmy Buffett's like road and regret album.
I think so a little bit. I can definitely see that, especially when you consider that like that kind of clock gets reset for Jimmy a little bit when he hits the massive wellspring of inspiration that is Key West with White Sport Coat and a Pink Crustacean.
Yeah, see, because I'm thinking he had 2 full years between High Cumberland Jubilee and White Sport Coat and a Pink Crustacean, so that is the original wellspring of ideas. For this matter, we're discounting the first 2 albums here.
Yeah.
And this would be his third album then, in that run. So I think part of this song is that maybe he has less material to work with, and that's why he's choosing covers. Mm-hmm. And we'll get to this on a later song. I think that's definitely the case on. But the other part of that is this is definitely a song about being on the road and what you actually want your music career to be. And even though he doesn't write this song, I think it does hit a note for Jimmy.
He is good at choosing his covers.
Yes, he is. So the Kenny Rogers in the first edition version of the song, I should say, Kenny Rogers does this twice. He does it with the first edition in 1974. He then records it for his much more well-known album, The Gambler, in 1978.
Yes.
The first edition version, it's way more country than this. This is like straight up rock and roll, Jimmy, and it's something we haven't heard from him before.
Not really, yeah.
Like, the closest you get to him, like, moving outside of the country genre in, you know, not one of his weird closers, I think is, like, saxophones, maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
So this is just straight up, like, rock and roll. Like, you're doing, like you're trying to form, like, a crowd-pleasing song for, like, an arena, almost, at this point. So the first edition version has a very prominent mandolin. It's really country. I like that version better now that I've heard that. But Jimmy's was the first version I heard.
Yeah, no, it definitely comes at a time when he is really starting to make music from money, or money from music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As opposed to, like, trying and struggling. And it is kind of interesting that this is when he chooses to include it. Like, as he's starting to see some success, he's touring. He is a musician, not just, you know, reporting on it, not just wanting to be a musician. He has made it to a point where he is a music, and that's where he gets his income from.
Yeah.
So
it is an interesting sort of notion generally.
Yeah, I mean, and we know Jimmy's had this sort of struggle because he's talked about it on some of his songs before, about, like, would he rather be at home in Key West, living a comfortable, quiet life, or would he like to actually make a living recording music in Nashville?
Yeah. There's an interesting tension there with a lot of Jimmy's music.
Yeah.
And I think it's certainly present here. I don't know, I think the song's fine.
I like the song. I think it's... I consider it one of, like, the two big highlights on side A. Again, I think side B is a stronger side.
Jimmy has a tendency to do this. We've kind of discovered. I think that the side B tends to be stronger. On this one, I think there's actually a reason for it. And I want to talk about that a little bit later on side A, but we'll get into that. For now, how about we move on to what I think is probably the worst song on the album, Door Number 3.
Yeah, well, it's a toss-up between me and a couple of the covers, mainly because I don't connect to covers as much as I do his. Also, the other part is he co-writes this song with Steve Goodman. I'm a fan of Steve Goodman.
Yeah.
I've heard Steve Goodman's version of the song. I think Steve Goodman's version of the song is much superior to this.
Door Number 3?
Yes,
okay.
And you can also tell where Jimmy wrote the song and where Steve wrote the song.
Yeah.
Steve wrote most of the song. Jimmy wrote the last verse, which is, I think, the worst verse.
I think it is. It does have the only part of the song I think I actually like, which is the harmony on "I Didn't Get Rich, You Son of a Bitch." That gave me a genuine guffaw, and then the rest of the song is like, okay, why am I listening to this?
Yeah, we'll get to this. So first, I do want to say Steve Goodman. He was lead acoustic guitarist on White Sport Coat.
Yeah.
He was absent from the last album. He's on lead acoustic guitar again. And his version came out next year.
Okay.
The next year, 1975. Jesse's Jig and Other Favorites was the name of the album. That album also has This Hotel Room, which he's going to cover on the next album, Havana Daydreamin'. So I do believe the core of this song is written by Steve Goodman because it's got his key, like, humor points to it rather than the cadence of Jimmy Buffett. Do you know what the fuck the instrument is, like, right at the beginning of the, like, there? I thought it was a piano at first, and then I thought maybe it's a vibraphone. I can't tell what's making that noise.
So this is a little update on Steel Drum Watch.
He went to Jimmy, looking for steel drums bothering him so. Well, steel drum killed his lady, left him with only one question. Which way do I steer for my steel drums?
This is pretty much going to be the only update because this album, the instrumentation tends to be pretty similar. I do think it's a vibraphone, right? And I also wanted to note on this song that I guess congas are just endemic to Jimmy's music now.
Yeah.
That's really the big update is, like, you know, last album, it was still sort of like you would have the vibraphones and the congas start to creep in sometimes. This album is really, it feels like almost every song has congas and vibraphones on it. And that's not an accurate depiction of the song. The first song, the cover of Making Music for Money, does not have a vibraphone on it, but it does have congas. It does have congas. So it's just kind of a thing where it's like, this instrumentation is omnipresent now. And I do think that the instrument at the beginning of door number 3 is a vibraphone.
Yeah, I mean, I do have to say, like, vibraphones and congas are not always going to be used in a Caribbean, kitschy sort of way that Jimmy Buffett is going to end up using them all.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're always used that way on the songs he's already used them on. But it is starting to become more prevalent. It was pretty prevalent on the last album with like Livingstone's Gone to Texas and Come Monday.
But now it is truly like there is somebody in the Coral Reefers who I suspect is probably one of Jimmy's friends in the Coral Reefers.
I think Farrell Morris is the percussionist.
So. Yeah, but God, that motherfucker loves congas. Like, right? Like,
yeah.
I don't know. Mayim, you didn't like this song very much.
Not particularly. Again, it just feels a lot like, I mean, as a lot of Jimmy Buffett kind of relies on nostalgia and it relies on these romantic, visions of Jimmy's childhood and other, like, cultural touchstones. It's like, yeah, this sure is, being a bum and trying to get rich off a game show that everyone likes on TV. And I don't know, it just doesn't seem like, especially with the, like, again, we're going to talk about the B-side. I agree. I think it's much better. And it has, like, this, like, really melancholy mood and a lot that I really like. And then this seems, such a disconnect from that. And, I don't know, just, like, the amount it seems to rely on, like, these cultural references, I just don't feel like there's much substance to it. And it wasn't doing it for me.
Yeah, we talked a lot about, on previous episodes, about the sort of hit or miss rate of Jimmy's novelty tracks. And this is definitely that. The closest song that we've had to it so far is Pencil Thin Mustache, which you might remember from our 15 minutes talking about it last episode. We didn't like very much.
Yeah, no,
but this is 100% the same thing, right? Pencil Thin Mustache is, Jimmy talking about, Ricky Ricardo and Errol Flynn movies.
Yeah, but there is a story to this one.
There's a story to this, but it is also like, he's writing a song about Monty Hall. Like,
yeah. So I do agree. I think this is classic Buffett dirtbag with the whole wanting to get rich on a TV show. So there's a different last verse in Steve Goodman's version, which
okay.
I will quote to you. So the last verse is the one I don't like. It's the one with the Monty, 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 I am walking down your hall. I do have to say it struck me that the entire song is written like an ABCB until you get to that last verse, and then it's the classic like ABCCB with the whole internal rhyme of "I didn't get rich, you son of a bitch."
Yeah.
Jimmy Buffett likes doing that so much.
He does like to do that.
So I noticed that, and then I went back to Steve Goodman's and I listened to it, and I remembered that he actually, instead of any of that, he quotes "Like a Rolling Stone" by Bob Dylan.
Okay.
So the last verse is, ain't it hard to realize he's not selling any alibis when he stares into the vacuum of your eyes and says, do you want to make a deal? That's the quote from Like a Rolling Stone. And, of course, you're contextualizing that in the concept of a game show where you are making a deal. So
yeah.
It's humorous. And then they found us in a Lost and Found, Love is Blind, but now I see that my whole world lies waiting behind door number 3. So I think that changes the vibe of the song. Because Jimmy Buffett's version where he's like name-checking Monty Hall,
yeah.
It's almost as if, because you have to remember, Let's Make a Deal is being filmed on, a studio set in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Jimmy Buffett's the entire continent away.
Yeah.
It's like as if he's like sitting in a trailer, like watching this on a TV, being like, I could do that. I'd be so rich if I did that.
I wouldn't have to do this touring schedule.
Yeah, sort of a thing.
Yeah.
And I think the way that Steve phrased it in the last one is he's actually making fun of the entire concept of people going on to the show.
I do think doing that. That sounds like a song I would like better.
Yeah, I recommend any of Steve Goodman's stuff, but Jesse's Jake and Other Favorites is a good album. I've mentioned Somebody Else's Troubles, which is his album he did in 1972, is my favorite of his, but this is also a really good one.
Yeah.
So I do want to say, my grandfather was on Let's Make a Deal in the late 60s. Yeah, he won a... He won a bedroom furniture set for my mother, which we had pieces of up until my house burned down in a wildfire. And so it was actually sturdy furniture, to say. I haven't been able to track down the episode. I don't think they hold on to episodes that long.
No, that kind of stuff becomes lost media pretty quickly.
Oh, I'd love to find it, though.
Yeah. Should we move on to Dallas?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the second song on this album that was fully not written by Jimmy. This was written by current session musician, eventual choral reefer guitarist Roger Bartlett.
He's actually not a session musician on this album. He's a touring musician.
My bad, thank
you.
you.
In 74, Jimmy Buffett's on tour, and except for the radio spot he does for the record plant that we're going to listen to, the entire rest of his touring, it's just him and Roger Bartlett on guitars.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I have some information on Bartlett because I found an interview with him where he talked about the origin of his partnership with Jimmy Buffett and him writing this song. I don't like this song.
You don't like this song very much.
I think this might be the weakest song on the album.
I don't agree. I don't think there's much going on it. It doesn't make a big impression on me.
Yeah, well,
But tell me why I should hate it.
I mean, you'd have to. It's not that I hate. We're going back to the point where, like, I often conflate the Ain't He a Genius award with weakest song on the album because I find that the worst thing a song can do is be boring and leave me with no impression of it.
Yeah.
If it's aggressively terrible, like Pencil Thin Mustache, then
that's at least an impression.
Yeah, that is at least an impression. It is eliciting some kind of emotion for me.
Yeah.
It's not a positive emotion, but this leaves me thinking, like, I don't remember anything about this song. And I do think that, like, the genesis of it is Roger Bartlett was like, hey, Dallas rhymes with callous. Let's build a song around that.
Yeah, a little bit. I can definitely see that. I have another song on this album, which is it's actually the next song, which for me wins the Ain't He a Genius award for this week.
Right.
Because like there's two things about this song that kind of make it stick out in my mind. One, it's one of the songs on the album that Jimmy didn't write, right? Which is kind of like, you know, it's not a great thing, but it is something that makes it stick out in my mind. But the other thing is that there's like this weird bloopy synthesizer going on in it, and I don't really know. Like there's an organ, but then there's also some sort of weird bloopiness going on. And I don't really know why that's happening.
Yeah, the instrumentation's a little weird on this.
It's a little odd, yeah.
I always think it's really weird when Jimmy does like a weird synthesizer thing. I'm sure we'll hear a lot of that in the 80s.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I think what's interesting about the song is that it isn't written by Jimmy Buffett, but he in many ways wasn't having a great time in the music industry.
Yeah.
Around the time. And so, like, in that sense, it kind of makes sense, but then the words not being his own undercuts that message in a way that, yeah, I think it's not my least favorite on the album, but it is certainly weaker than some ones we'll get to later in the album.
Yeah, I mean, I think this being written by Roger Bartlett, who was touring with Jimmy, I do think this is indicative of Jimmy not having enough material for the album.
I think so.
And asking around.
So I'll go into this now, right? I have two thoughts on this, right? First of all, there's a song on the B side, Trying to Reason with Hurricane Season, which we'll talk about when we get to it, where Jimmy pretty clearly is burned out. You know, he's kind of depressed, he's burned out, he's not really sure what he's doing, right? But there's a second aspect to this that I think is really interesting, which is that when he was recording this, he pretty clearly just wants to start writing full nautical material, right? He wants to write full beach material, and that just be the whole album. And it's pretty clear that his label doesn't want him to do that, right? This is on ABC now? It's right? Is this the first ABC?
No, this is still done. I mean, it's essentially the same thing.
Either way,
but we're still dealing with Don Gant in Nashville.
Yeah, and so Don Gant doesn't seem to want him to go into full tropics mode, right? Obviously, eventually that's just going to happen for Jimmy. But you can kind of tell that like this side of the album, the A side is the side that they compromise, right? The B side has all the nautical material on it. The A side has none of the nautical material on it. And the A side has 3 songs that weren't written by Jimmy on it.
Yeah.
Right? It's pretty clear where his mind is, where he's getting inspiration from, and it's not from, you know, the stuff that the like traditional country stuff. It's not really, he really needs to be like anchored in the tropics from here on out to write material at length. That's just kind of, I think, the situation.
Yeah. So the story that Bartlett gives about the origin of this song and his acquaintance with Jimmy.
Yeah.
So Bartlett says he was in Dallas when he wrote the song, apparently. He had a band in Dallas that was sort of like Crosby, Stills, and Nash-esque. The club they played him made him wear a short hair wig to cover up his long hair, so that way it wouldn't offend customers with his hippiness.
Okay.
Bartlett, he's got some funny stories to this. Apparently he moved down to Austin. That's when he met and was hired by Jimmy as a touring guitarist. Somewhere along the line, he was asked if he had any songs that that Jimmy Buffett could record. So Bartlett claims to have written the songs "A Buccaneer Looks at 39" and "I Wish I Had a Handlebar Mustache," but those were rejected in favor of Dallas. That was his recollection. I think that was a poor choice. I think "A Buccaneer Looks at 39" would have flowed well in the side B.
Do we have any further thoughts about Dallas, or should we move along?
No, I do not.
All right, so we move on into the song that, for me, gets the sort of anti-genius award for non-impressionality, and that's Presence to Send You.
This gives me... This is not for exactly one reason.
Okay, well...
we will get to.
So, it's the song where it's like, it makes exactly two impressions on me. First of all, I feel like we're getting a lot more backing vocals from the Coral Reefers on this album.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure why, but it seems like they are, and it's like this like sort of high harmony that's just echoing. It's a sound that I associate very heavily with the 1970s, like sort of doing that like high harmony right on like specific things to like highlight them.
Yeah, it's people like emulating the like the doo-wop sound of the late 50s.
A little bit, yeah.
Badly, I would say.
I would say so. Yeah, but beyond that, I do not... The song has no... It's like white noise to me.
So there's a lot of Caribbean mentions in the song, because he does talk about like going to Barbados and stuff.
That's true.
I mentioned that's the first time Jimmy Buffett mentions any of the Lesser Antilles in the songs. Like he's talking about Cuba.
Yeah.
Has he talked about any of the Greater Antilles? And I think he might have mentioned the Bahamas once.
I think he might have mentioned the Bahamas.
This is the first time he talks about like any of the smaller islands further towards like South America.
Yeah.
So he wants to go deep into the Caribbean now.
Yeah.
So the one reason that I don't think this wins the Anti-Genius Award for me is that the line, "The last little bout I got my hair pulled out," he writes about this in like 2 or 3 different songs throughout his career. This was Jimmy Buffett being beat up by renowned horrific McNairy County Sheriff Buford Pusser.
Okay, I don't know who this man is.
Prolific enough that Behind the Bastards did a 2-parter on him.
Well, I guess I can learn about it.
So
folks, go listen to Behind the Bastards. I think
this is mostly so. Buford Pusser is there was a series of movies that was based on his accounts as sheriff. It was called like I think Walking Tall or something like that.
I've heard of that movie series.
Yeah, and it sort of glorifies the idea of being essentially an authoritarian sheriff. So the story that the song refers to regards, as Jimmy says, on the day he recorded God's Own Drunk, he and his drummer Sammy Creason went to a bar and they wound up drinking a lot of tequila. So after leaving the bar, they couldn't find the car that they came in, so Jimmy Buffett got up on the hood of a Cadillac to get a better view of the parking lot, and he was stomping on the car with his golf shoes on. It just so happened to be that the owner of that car was Buford Pusser. And he saw the whole thing. So Jimmy and Sammy Creason saw him coming. They ran away, but they couldn't get away in time. So Pusser wound up punching Creason and pulling some of Jimmy's hair before they could get away. So this places the story in October of 1973, which is when Living and Dying was recorded. But it also places it in Nashville, which is half a state away from McNairy County. So I'm not entirely certain how Buford Pusser ended up over there in Nashville. So, I mean, maybe the story's a little exaggerated. I'm not quite certain. But that was the little research I got to do on this. And
well, that does make it leave an impression. Not really musically, but
no, not musically.
No, it's
and Jimmy wrote this one, right?
Yeah, Jimmy wrote this one. I think.
This is definitely another one of those I'm on the road, I wish I could be back home.
Yeah, I agree.
Songs.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have any thoughts about Presence to Send You at all?
No, it's fun to hum.
It is kind of fun to hum, yeah.
Yeah, like once it ends, like not knowing that specific incident, it really just does not leave an impression.
Yeah, this is why it wins the Anti-Genius Award for this week for me, is because like as soon as Presence to Send You ends, I forget what key it's in, I forget the tempo, I forget its basic structure. It's just gone. It exits my mind completely.
All right. Well then we'll move on to Stories We Could Tell.
So this is the third cover on the A side of this album.
Yeah, it's written by John Sebastian of the Love and Spoonful fame.
I don't know much about this gentleman. I looked up a little bit about him, and I found that he was in a band called the Mugwumps.
That was the predecessor to Levin's Spoonful.
Which I thought was interesting for personal reasons.
So John Sebastian, he's a singer-songwriter guy. He does his own version of this in 1974's Tarzana Kid. It's actually a slower song.
Yeah.
I find it interesting. I tend to think of Jimmy Buffett slowing down songs when he covers them. Mm-hmm. But he sped this one up a bit. I like John Sebastian's more because it's very much like a personal song, so you can tell that John Sebastian has a little more meaning behind it. Like when he talks about going to Nashville and seeing the guitar, which I believe is supposed to be Hank Williams' guitar. Yeah. And all those melodies flooding back into his mind. And it's got some interesting personnel. Phil Everly of the Everly Brothers was on the backing vocals in Sebastian's version. And it was arranged by David Paich, who was about to be one of the keyboardists for Toto.
Okay. It's so interesting how people move around the music industry.
Yeah, but then again, so this is another connection between Jimmy Buffett and the Laurel Canyon Sound. We were talking about this.
We were talking about it.
Either an album or two albums ago about how like Jimmy Buffett is sort of starting to do like the East Coast version of the Laurel Canyon Sound down in Florida.
Were we talking about it because of England? Like, I know we talked about the Moody Blues.
No.
This is different.
We were talking about this on, I think it was on White Sport Coat is when we were talking about it.
I can't remember specifically what it was, but it was something.
Oh, it was on Peanut Butter Conspiracy.
It was Peanut Butter Conspiracy.
Peanut Butter Conspiracy was a band out of LA.
Yeah, I remember now. Yeah, this is kind of we've talked a little bit about how Jimmy chooses covers pretty well. This is a weird choice for him, I think.
I don't think it's that weird of a choice when you put it in the context of him doing all this touring, because I think the message of the song is trying to like work through why you're doing what you're doing, and Jimmy's clearly not enjoying all of the touring he's doing.
Yeah.
So this is essentially like, really what this is, it's a more complex emotion that is conveying the same message as Presents to Send You.
Yeah.
Because it's also doing a little bit of introspection.
Yeah, that makes much more sense than sort of how I was approaching this. That's kind of sell me on as being okay. I haven't heard the original though, so maybe I'll listen to that and be like, well, that's clearly a superior version.
Yeah, Tarzana Kid's a good album.
I'll have to check it out. I don't know. There's something about this song that didn't like strike me very hard. Like the section about the guitar, like I clocked that as being probably like Hank Williams' guitar.
Yeah.
Also, but I didn't really. That was sort of this notion of like, what is he doing? And then I realized that he didn't write it, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to be able to figure out precisely what's going on, but I do think I understand why Jimmy chose this. No.
I mean, yeah, this, like it is. I do think that there is. I understand the theming connecting to what Jimmy Buffett's experiencing at the moment, but like a song like The Stories We Can Tell, I think is just inherently an odd choice for a cover. Because it is like kind of a very personal song about an individual's experience. So anytime you take it out of that, I don't know. I don't know think that it's inherently a bad choice, but like there has to be some real reason that you would choose to cover this.
And I think the touring does sort of present that. Like, you sort of get in a situation a lot where sometimes people do covers because they see something in a song that the writer didn't, right? And sometimes they pull weird stuff out of that. There's a million classic examples of that. And this is one of them where Jimmy saw something that was like present in the initial song that I guess maybe he felt like he couldn't convey, or that like he needed to speak through. For
what do you think is the biggest example of somebody doing that? I just want to know whether you're going to say the one that I hate people saying.
The one that always jumps to my mind is Johnny Cash covering "Hurt" off of Nine Inch Nails.
Okay, good. That's fine.
Are you thinking about all Along the Watchtower? Or?
No, I'm thinking about all the covers of Hallelujah that turn it into like a religious song. It's like,
I do think about those.
The song is about sex.
Yeah.
It's a Leonard Cohen song. It's always about sex.
Yeah, I think that that's like an important notion, but I do think that like the thing is that like oftentimes when I think about those, I think about them positively. I think about Hurt. I think about All Along the Watchtower. I think about like
what I mean is people use that as an example, and I think that's a poor choice of an example.
It is, yeah.
It's people actually misunderstanding what the song is about rather than pulling something new from it.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question really quick?
Sure.
How do you feel about woodblocks?
How do I feel about woodblocks?
Yeah, for percussion.
I think I don't think I've ever thought about woodblocks as percussion. I mean, I've thought about them as percussion before, but I don't think I'm like ambivalent on them, I suppose.
Well, this next song has woodblocks on it.
Yeah, it does. Before we move on to Life is Just a Tire Swing, those are all we've had a couple of Jimmy Buffett covers before.
Yeah.
You and I are in agreement. He's nailed covers before. On the last album,
Absolutely, he did really good on Ballad of Spider John. I thought, like, God's Own Drunk.
Those are excellent choices for songs that Jimmy actually inhabits. Do we think he succeeded on the 3 covers that he did this album?
That's an interesting point. So let's see here. Making music for money, I think is an interesting choice.
I think good choice.
I think good choice. I think he does pretty well because I think that, like, you know, you talked about how, like, the original is not really the sort of rock like music, but I think that, like, making it a rock song makes it kind of a good opener.
Yeah.
And also, like, it's stuff that Jimmy's thinking about. I don't know if nails is the term, but I think it's a good cover, right? Dallas is weird. I don't know how to feel about Dallas.
I mean, I think that's a little weird. I don't have an original version to compare it to.
Yeah, for Dallas.
Because Roger Bartlett didn't record it himself until like 2020.
Yeah, we could talk about Door Number 3, which I think Jimmy's I don't like this recording.
I think that's inferior, but he did co-write it, so I'm not.
Yeah, it's not really the
fully
same
as a cover.
Dallas, I also think, is kind of a weak song. You know, we've established. And Stories We Could Tell. I really don't think that he nailed this. Right? I think
it's a strong choice. I think it's poor execution.
I think so. I don't think it's like gone into with like bad thought. Like, you know, we'll get into that when, like, we get into, like, why are you covering Brown Eyed Girl, right?
It always goes back to Brown Eyed Girl.
I think that cover of Brown Eyed Girl is the impetus of this podcast.
We haven't even played Mayim any of the things. We'll have to do that. I have them.
Yeah. But we'll get to it. But it's you know, I think that this is a good choice. I agree. I don't think it's executed very well.
Yeah. Okay. So Life is Just a Tire Swing. I want to point out, first of all, I don't know why, musically, this reminds me of Southern Man by Neil Young.
I can hear it. We were talking a little bit about this in the car over, and Mayim pointed out that, like, this is like a very nostalgic view of life in the South as a child.
Yeah. It's definitely a nostalgic song. When it gets to that point about being on the Illinois road and getting into a car accident, I think that shows you that, like, the impetus of all of this nostalgia is the touring. Because he is in Illinois, he does go to Chicago. I did notch the, and I finally learned a thing about Pain Turnaround. It echoes the Death Valley Lives without not even sure what really gives, and then it's foreshadowing the Nobody's Fault part of Margaritaville again.
Yeah, so this is something that Jimmy does a lot, not even in, well, as we'll get into the closing track, does the same thing of, like, subtly changing the chorus to indicate a passage of time. And I think something that overall I really do enjoy, it really ties into Jimmy Buffett's kind of identity as a storyteller in his music, and, like, trying to embody this character of someone who's kind of, like, you know, comes from this very idealized, like, romantic view of early life into being washed up, kind of battered by the world.
Yeah.
Just, like, you know, eventually landing at that beach bum.
Yeah, it is, like, there's a little part of my brain that says, like, this is, like, an interesting, like, songwriting trick, right? And I feel like that demeans it a little bit, because I think it works really well.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, having these subtle changes. And also, like, this is a song sort of about that, right? About sort of that, learning things about pain, you know? About becoming that sort of thing. But I do want to point out that the words, life is just a tire swing, is, like, we kind of talked about, like, classic Jimmy wisdom a little bit.
Yeah.
Previously, I think, like, most notably on He Went to Paris with the line, some of it's magic, some of it's tragic.
And I mean, we noticed that this is a thing that goes back to, like, because we talked about this even on, like, Bend a Little by Cumberland. But yeah, this is another one in that genre of, this is Jimmy saying, this is Jimmy's chillax wisdom.
Yeah, a little bit. Life's just a tire swing, man. Like, yeah, no, exactly. But I gotta say, like, also, I think the wood blocks as percussion are a little bit goofy, you know, when they show up in the song. I don't hate the song. I think I kind of like it, honestly.
No, I like the song. It might be the strongest track for me on side A.
I think it is for me.
Yeah, and I think that the woodblocks are very intentional when we think about, like, the themes of being, you know, like, very much, like, down home, like, in the South, like, all that, and, like, like, these kinds of improvised instruments are a definite nod to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, there's this nostalgia, there is, like, a level of, like, romanticization of the South going on. in this song, like of like good Southern living, and I think that the woodblocks kind of evoke that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also sort of like evocative more of like rural living.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
in that last verse he talks he and it's one of my favorite pieces of imagery. I think a song we've covered so far is when he refers to being stared at by a bunch of Grant Wood faces.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's great imagery because like these dour, serious rural faces, like that are echoing American Gothic.
So I was listening to Woodblocks very recently because my partner is a percussionist in a concert band.
Yeah,
and she was performing, various Christmas songs, including Sleigh Ride, right? And she wasn't playing woodblocks, but woodblocks show up in Sleigh Ride to evoke horse hooves very often, which I feel like is a very, like, sort of, especially at this age when, like, automobiles start to become more prevalent, they start to evoke rural life more.
right.
But I don't know. I like the song.
Any more thoughts, or is it time to flip the record, folks?
I think I have one. Sorry, you go
one
first.
more for me. I think that one thing I really love about this project that the two of you have undertaken, and I think this song is a great kind of example of why, is I think a lot of Jimmy Buffett's music is almost intended to be a little vibes-based, just like, kick back, life is just a tire swing. And so taking this analytical scope to it, I think is a really interesting idea. Like, what if we really analyze all of these, like, chill Jimmyisms from a more critical standpoint? So,
yeah,
I think it's just such a... It's a song that I think was never intended to be looked at this way, and that's why there is so much merit in looking at it this way.
Yeah, and see, I think that's why, like, I think the line in He Went to Paris bothers me a lot less than when the entire song is based around that notion. It's because it's at least framing it in some semblance of, like, grounded reality about, like, life is not always just a tire swing.
Yeah. I think that the thing that I really like about this song, like the song that it kind of makes me think of is There's Nothing Soft About Hard Times off of Down to Earth, which is a song that we both fucking hated.
Yeah,
like,
well, that's
we're
talking
song.
about like authenticity.
Yeah, like the inauthenticity of that, of like, oh, I grew up in this poor situation, had to abandon my like family to go make it or whatever, and it's just like that's not indicative of Jimmy's life. Right?
And this is why I enjoyed the Wino and I Know.
Yeah, that
is that it's a more mature and authentic version of that song.
Yeah, this
down to it being set in New Orleans.
Yeah, and this feels like an extension of that, right?
Yeah.
It's like sort of even acknowledging, like, I didn't really know anything about pain, right? When I was younger, even like when I was younger a few years ago, like 5 years ago, I didn't really know. Now I'm starting to learn a lot about pain, right? Like he's like, I'm starting to get it.
Yeah.
And I kind of that's something that is like, no, I do like that about this song. I do like
that now we are chronicling like the history of Jimmy Buffett's pain.
Yeah, a little bit. We're kind of getting there.
It almost makes it feel like he's he's empathizing with us.
It's weird because like eventually I know that like eventually we're going to get into a point where like we're just listening to like, like Don't Stop the Carnival and we're just like, fuck, I'm sick to hell of this. But like right now I'm like really enjoying like dealing with this and sort of like dealing with Jimmy on a human level as opposed to like Jimmy, this like weird corporate mascot, like cult leader figure. Like we're not there. Like we're dealing with like Jimmy, struggling singer-songwriter, dealing with like the tough things, and I like that a lot. Let's flip the record over.
All right, it's time to flip the record. And welcome back to Side B.
Folks, we talked a little bit about this. This is really interesting because this Side B is full nautical. It is all nautical, tropical, beach-themed songs.
Yeah, the A1A is a very two-sided album.
It very much is.
It literally has two sides, obviously.
Yeah, but like we've had we've talked a lot about this, about like Jimmy's B-sides tend to hit us better than his A-sides, right?
That's been the theme
so far.
That's been the theme on, I think, all of the Dunhill releases.
I think so, but this album in particular, like there's a very strong thematic shift from side A to side B.
Yeah.
It's really like I said, it really feels like Dunhill Records, maybe Don Gant in particular, didn't want Jimmy to go in this full nautical mode. Right?
Yeah, we're moving from touring to water.
Yeah, absolutely, we're moving into the water, and like there's a little bit of this that I think we can read as being commentary on his touring schedule, but also, we talk a lot about how Jimmy's at his best when he's writing stuff he knows about, right?
Yeah. See, at the top of this podcast, I mentioned I think the album can be categorized as road and regret.
Yeah,
I think side A is road, and I think side B is regret.
yeah, because he's not.
And I think there's a mesh. There's some regret on side A, and there's a tiny bit of road. As in, there's the mention of a specific road that is the title of the album.
Yeah, exactly.
On side B.
Oh, the name of the album is literally a road. That didn't connect with me at all. I'm a little.
And it's a coastal road. It's a road that's right on the beach. Mm-hmm. Road and
the
sea.
A1A is
right
the highway right along that eastern coast of Florida.
We talked about this a little bit. This is another thing we talked a little bit about in the drive over, is that A1A is kind of comparable to Highway 1 here in California in a number of ways, but also, like, traveling on A1A and traveling on Highway 1 evoke very different things. They evoke different imagery, but they also evoke different activities, right?
Yeah.
Especially now that, post Jimmy, now that A1A and the Keys have become much more commercialized, much more touristy, traveling down A1A sort of becomes like very much like a moving into like party mode. Like, we're going to go get fucked up in Cancun or whatever, right?
Right.
Like, and Highway 1 is not like that, really. It's very different.
No.
Much more cliffy, much more mountainous, and...
Well, if you moved in, like, to the south, where it's actually, like, called Pacific Coast Highway, it's a little more analogous, but it is still a very different vibe.
Yeah, and I think
because you're still going past, like, the oil fields and stuff.
But I think that, like, this notion of, like... I think Jimmy is key for developing this notion of A1A in this turn, right? Like, obviously he's a key figure in, like, commercializing and making Key West a tourist trap, right? But
right.
Like in this, right, like, he's kind of taking on that role of, like, when he moves into the nautical side of the album, that's where he wants to move down A1A. He wants to take that trip down to Key West, right? He longs for being on that endless bridge off into the water, and that's kind of that's very interesting to me. And we start with a song on this side of the album that I think is I kind of think this might be my favorite of his Big Eight.
Definitely of his Big Eight.
Yeah, like,
before coming into this podcast,
yeah,
out of all the songs I knew about Jimmy, I single this out as my favorite song.
It's really good. So this is A Pirate Looks at 40.
And it's a song that clearly shows that, like, it does authentically show that, like, Jimmy Buffett, like, really loves the ocean. Like, he's more comfortable on a boat than on land.
He really is. There's a number of things about the song that I think work really well. I do want to point out before we get into it that Jimmy was 28 when he wrote the song.
He was 27.
He was 27, that's true.
We're both older than her, yeah.
Jesus Christ, all three of us are, yeah. But it's this kind of interesting thing of, like, we talked a lot about on the first album about Truck Stop Salvation, about, like, if he had been writing that on any other album, that song would be in first person, right?
Right.
And this is, like, one of those songs where it's, like, the subject is not Jimmy. It's very obviously not Jimmy, because he's just not old enough to be that subject. But, like, he's sort of starting to get this, like, battered, world-weary figure about him.
But Jimmy identifies with
He identifies with this.
character.
Yeah, he identifies with this main character. But also, like, he can use first-person imagery to sort of evoke certain aspects of a story.
Yeah.
And that's what he's doing here on A Pirate Looks at 40 to pretty spectacular effect.
I mean, it's a good story song.
It is.
It is in a lot of ways like He Went to Paris, but in a first person.
Yeah.
In the way that it's presented. It is a song that's called A Pirate Looks at 40, and I have something to say about a later song on this record about how the title doesn't actually match the song when you think of Jimmy Buffett, because you think there'd be a lot more kitsch.
Yeah.
In the instrumentation and in the lyrics. Like, for instance, this spoiler alert for boat drinks, there's not a single drink actually mentioned in this song. There's some mentions of drinking, but no specific drink mentioned.
I mean, there's specific mention of being drunk for 2 weeks straight.
And
we'll get into the honorable mentions.
Other intoxicants.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to point out, Jimmy Buffett did have a bachelor's degree in history from University of Southern Mississippi.
He did?
Yep.
Yeah, he did.
I didn't know that. I thought it was
200 years too late. The song's being written in 1974. You go back 200 years, that's 1774. That's well after the golden age of piracy.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to be kind, you could take his birth year of 1946.
Yeah.
200 years before that, 1746. That's still 2 decades too late for, like, the end of the golden age of piracy. So I went over to Buffett News to see if the Parrot Heads had anything to say about this. And user Cuervo, these names get worse and worse as I go on, wrote in September 2005 that 200 years before the song was about the time the Atocha was lost. Now, the Atocha was a Spanish galleon, and the wreck is along Key West. The Atocha went down in 1622, so that guy's a fucking moron.
So
this ties into that note that you made earlier.
Yeah, so I something that I noticed, this is something I noticed again on the drive over here, that this song kind of evokes this notion that's very popular in Westerns, especially Westerns that take place in 1880s, 1890s, or if they're really bold, in the 20th century, of the West just ain't built for cowboys no more, right? And this whole song is about that a little bit. But I think it's interesting to note that even if you think about 200 years too late, 200 years before that, the waters still just weren't built for pirates no more.
But so he is still talking about modern day piracy though, because he does talk about he does talk about drug running.
Yeah, he talks about drug running. He talks about various other things. It's this is absolutely one of his songs that have this darker sort of talking about a criminal element to them.
Yeah.
But it's
Outlaw Country.
Outlaw Country, yeah, exactly. There's a number of songs on this that sort of, I think, still align Jimmy with Outlaw Country. This is definitely the strongest of them, I think. This song is just it has 7 or 8 lines where every time I hear them, I'm like, that's the best line on the record. Right?
I still posit Mother, Mother Ocean, I Have Heard Your Call is one of the best opening lines to any song.
It's super good. It's
And it also centers both a performer and the subject for the song. I read this while reading a wonderful collection of essays called Ways of Seeing, and one thing that comes up a lot is how perspective in art has changed. The idea that this piece is going to be viewed from a specific angle. It is for this one point in space and time. And so this does an interesting thing of positioning the subject to view this song as the ocean. This is Jimmy singing to the ocean and how our relationship has changed over time. Yeah. And even if the actual years don't line up, the other line about we traded sails for steam, it really talks about how the relationship to the ocean as a mother, as this nurturing thing, has changed to one much closer to exploitation.
Yeah, there is a weird, almost environmental aspect to the song.
Yeah.
Environmentalism is going to become, a big theme for Jimmy.
Yeah, it's not quite, the theme yet, but especially as people become more sort of aware of climate change.
As ecology becomes a larger part of...
Jimmy becomes a big...
we're still nascent. I mean, the EPA had only been put together 2 or 3 years previous at this point.
But the line, the opening line is good, but I also really like all the lines that are sort of this dude's life is falling apart, right?
Yeah.
He's depressed about a number of things, but also I've been drunk for over 2 weeks, made enough money to buy Miami, I pissed it away so fast. Gotta go fishing down to rock bottom again. It's
and then there's a lot of wistfulness and it brings us back to They Don't Dance Like Carmen No More, where there's genuine emotion in the song that you can connect with, whether you're aware of all of the references or not. So even if you're not a modern day pirate, the idea of arriving too late for something, there's just the way in which you're phrasing that, you understand that.
This does have that sort of same powerful melancholy. Yeah. I've been talking to my parents a lot about this podcast, and it's interesting because my dad and stepmother are sort of why are you spending all this time on this project for music you don't like? And it's it's not even that I don't like the music. There's a lot of music I don't like that Jimmy recorded, but I think Jimmy's really interesting. But
we've also found quite a few songs that
we did like quite a lot. Yeah. When I was talking to my mom about it, I was talking about how I had that sort of weird, powerful emotional experience with Death of an Unpopular Poet, how it almost made me cry, and I was that doesn't, I didn't think Jimmy could do that, and my mom said, wait until you turn 40 and listen to A Pirate Looks at 40, and it'll hit you. And I could definitely see that sort of happening, of
So, well, you guys will have to hold on tight for Wasting Away 2036.
Something like that. We're going to do this again. Just Jimmy again.
Just that song when we turn 40.
Just do Pirate Looks at 40 when we turn 40. That's not a bad idea. I do want to note that in the same way that it starts with Mother, Mother Ocean, I've Heard You Call, which is a fantastic opener, it also closes on an unbelievable line, which is Feel Like I've Drowned, Gonna Head Uptown.
Yeah, so this is... This, and we'll get to this when we get to the album closer.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, a great song. This song doesn't belong in terms of album sequencing at the start of a side.
No, it doesn't.
It belongs at the end of an album side.
Yeah.
I think this is a great album closer, and I wish it was the album closer, because I think it's a better album closer. Because it has a sort of finiteness to the last song.
Yeah.
That still sort of leaves it open-ended, that I think I really like for the end of a song. Because I've talked about before that I like when songwriters write very vague like line endings.
Yeah.
And then have like, the instrumental break, or that's the end of the song or something. It leaves you thinking about it.
So
right?
so when I've been thinking about really great album closers, right? I've been thinking about an album I got into for the first time this year, which is The Queen Is Dead by the Smiths.
Okay.
And I think that song that album has the song There's a Light That Never Goes Out, which I think is one of the greatest album closers ever written. I know I'm getting something wrong, but let me finish. Listeners, do not just start typing I'm an idiot. This song, it's like this powerfully depressed, like almost like suicidal like song that's just sort of like exits into this like very like calm instrumentation before just sort of ending sort of out of nowhere.
What year did that album come out?
86, I think.
Okay.
And it's just like, an unbelievable song that is like, it just kind of like feels like it ends and then it sort of lets it just sit and you're just kind of stuck there with like this terrible dark mood. And then The Queen Is Dead has another song after that one that's the worst song on the album by miles and miles, which is Some Girls Are Bigger Than Others.
Yeah.
And I don't know why they wrote that song, but like...
Oh, so it wasn't the closing track.
It wasn't the closing track. I think it's the best closing track maybe ever written, and it's not the closing track.
Wow, okay, so I was wondering whether that was influenced then, because it's 86, the year before, Orchestral Maneuvers In the Dark had an album called Crush. The final album, or the final song on that was called The Lights Are Going Out.
It could be.
It's a very different song, because OMD's a weird band.
I'm one of the millions of people who fucking hates Morrissey, but also, like, he did write, like, 80 all-time classics, right? Or whatever.
Yeah.
And, like, he would be the kind of person who would be aware of stuff like that. So maybe, but I don't know. But this is, like, I don't know that I necessarily disagree. I really love the album closer. We're going to get into this when we get to it. Mayim, this is your favorite. That's your favorite Jimmy Buffett song is Tin Cup Chalice. And, like, it is good. I don't necessarily think that it's wrong to think that this would be a better closer, though.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking about it now, and I'm not opposed to the idea of this coming after Tin Cup Chalice. Like
that would be kind of a powerful 1-2 punch of like having like that like really like positive notion of being by the sea, right?
Yeah.
And then ending with like this sort of like depressed like the notion of drowning, right?
So
well, honestly, if I'm thinking about this. I might would just like switch them, because thinking about, or maybe restructure it all, because in terms of like what goes well into the other, if we think about
trying to reason with hurricane season, yeah,
like potentially going into this, I think there are some similar.
Yeah, there's sort of
synchronicity, by the way.
Yeah.
We all said that at the exactly
same
time.
There's like a depressed notion on that song, which would feed into this really well. But there's also, I think, here's what I'm thinking. I think A Pirate Looks at 40 would probably be a better closer. But I think about it this way. Could Jimmy have closed the album that way? Because I think about like how he's writing about the tropics on this album, right? And about Key West, about the beach. And I kind of think that like, in that sense, here I'm trying to humanize Jimmy, and again, like he wants to close on that more positive note, right?
Yeah.
He like A Pirate Looks at 40 might be a better closer from like a purely like objective artistic standpoint, but I also think it makes total sense that Jimmy wants to close on that more positive note of being like hopeful about being by the sea.
Right.
And like why the sea matters so much to him.
There's actually a couple songs, and one of them is the next one, where it's not particularly positive about the area that he lives in right now.
Yeah.
So shall we move on?
Song's killer. That's all we gotta say.
To Migration, which is a song that is about people retiring to Florida and Jimmy Buffett not understanding why they would.
Yeah.
And it's also, ostensibly, about Jimmy Buffett saying, I live here, but also, why do I live here? Why don't I move further south to Martinique?
Yeah. It's kind of an interesting song. This one didn't leave very much of an impression on me, honestly, when I first listened to it. It's probably like, for me, it might be the biggest whiff of the B-side, but also I really like its last verse about if I live to be an old man.
Yeah.
Like the evocation of just like crawling into a bottle with a parrot on your shoulder or whatever.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of Key West references in here. So, or a lot of references. So the Bogart suit, that's a reference to the 1948 movie Key Largo, which starred Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. It's later immortalized in a song by his fellow Floridian and I think better writer of trop rock, Bertie Higgins, in 1981 song Key Largo, which, by the way, if you've never heard his 1982 album, Just Another Day in Paradise, the Parrot Heads are going to be pissed off at me for recommending this. I think it's a better album than anything Jimmy ever wrote.
I'll have to listen to that one. My God.
It closes with a 7.5-minute song called The Tropics, and it's a better song about the tropics than any of the songs that Jimmy wrote because it's not as kitschy.
That's kind of compelling. I'm going to have to check it out. Key Largo, of course, also referenced on, I think, the worst ever recording of a brilliant song, which is Kokomo. But...
Oh, yeah.
Well, maybe eventually we'll have cause to talk more about the Beach Boys, but that's another day.
I don't quite want to tap that keg yet.
We'll get into there later, maybe.
So let's see. Listening to Murphy, Walker, and Willis. So Jerry Jeff Walker, Willis Allen Ramsey, or the Walker and Willis there. We know they're both involved with Jimmy Buffett. Jimmy Buffett co-wrote Railroad Lady with Jerry Jeff Walker.
Yes.
He covered Ramsey's Ballad of Spider John. The Murphy, I think, is supposed to be Michael Martin Murphy, who's just getting started this time.
Okay.
He's progressive country in that scene out of Austin.
Yeah.
So like Towns Van Zandt, him, Joe Eli, Rodney Crowell, that sort of thing. Which is kind of a cousin movement to the outlaw country movement in Nashville. He is vaguely involved with that. We're going to see a bit of it in a minute when he says, "Some Texas hidden here in my heart."
Yeah.
That is the line I wanted to bring up. Because like the preceding one, Caribbean Soul, that I can't control, that makes sense with where Jimmy's going. Do you know from your research, like, what do you know kind of where he's coming from with a little bit of Texas in my heart? Because while he's certainly from the South, I don't know particularly of his connections to Texas specifically.
He grew up mostly in Mobile, Alabama, and then Pascagoula, Mississippi. That's all like right on that little stretch between like Galveston to, west, the Florida Panhandle. That's all pretty like close to each other. Maybe as Californians it's difficult for us to understand that like 4 states are like within a 50-mile radius of each other.
Yeah,
But
I think that like, so something that strikes me is that like obviously a pretty key part of Jimmy's childhood is going to the Gulf and sailing around with his grandfather.
Yeah.
And that I think that like it is conceivable that like one of the places they shove off from is like Gulf, Texas.
yeah.
Right? That's definitely understandable. But also like this is not the first time that Jimmy has evoked Texas or dare I say romanticized Texas, right? Because it's a pretty major part of Livingston's Gone to Texas, a song neither of us really like.
Right.
And also, like, again, Texas, or at least a part of it, I know obviously Texas is huge, but like has been mentioned on this album in Dallas,
Yes.
which is not particularly
it's not particularly positive.
But we know he is performing in Dallas over the last couple of years. He performs in like 4 or 5 different cities in Texas just this year.
Yeah, it's also important to note that like Texas occupies like a very particular place in American consciousness and in Southern consciousness.
Well, it is it is one of the 2 hubs of country music at this time.
Yeah.
West of the Mississippi.
Absolutely.
It's Nashville, Austin, and then Los Angeles.
Yeah. It really feels like this is sort of an aspect of that. Like I don't really know exactly what he's evoking when he says I've got Texas, a little bit of Texas in my heart. Is that it? No, Caribbean Soul, I can't just control, and Texas.
Some Texas hidden here in my heart.
Some Texas hidden in my heart. But like people who listen to country music in this age, that hits them, right?
Yeah.
For sure, that hits them because evoking Texas does this sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it refers to his connection to that progressive country scene.
I could see that, yeah.
Because we've also gotten like his connection to the LA country-ish scene.
Yeah.
It's not exactly Laurel Canyon, is what we've been talking about, and that is what John Sebastian, I think, is. The progressive country in LA, that's, like Graham Parsons and Emmylou Harris and Commander Cody and his Lost Planet Airmen. It's a bit different. I think he's got a connection to Emmylou Harris. I don't know if it's been made prevalent yet. And then, of course, he's been out there on tour.
Yeah.
In both places. He mentioned it on the last album when Come Monday he'd been out there.
Yeah, that's true. This is also another, migration, that notion does sort of have traveling as a notion.
Yeah, as a theme.
Yes, I think that's another line. Put another mark in the column for this being a road album.
Yeah. Exactly. And I frankly love road album. One of my favorite albums of all time is a road album, Hesher Road by Joni Mitchell. I think they make really good concept albums. I think this one is more concept sides, obviously, as we mentioned. But I do like the theme sort of running through the album.
Yeah, because another song that I think has a big connection to this road notion, sort of road weariness that Jimmy's feeling, is Trying to Reason with Hurricane Season. This is a really dour song.
This is essentially a song about him coming back to Key West and being like, well, it's not perfect here all the time. Yeah,
being a little the hurricane season, kind of feels like maybe he's talking about touring season.
I mean, I want to say, when I was looking at the track list for this, I was dreading seeing this song just because of the title.
The title feels like
Trying to Reason with the Hurricane Season sounds like it's something that Jimmy Buffett wrote in 1998 and put on an album named after a fruit.
It feels like we're in for Volcano level hit. Kitsch, right?
Yeah.
That feels like what this is. And that's not what this song is at all.
No, the title is never mentioned in the song. And I genuinely appreciate that he never even uses that line.
No, I think it would be a worse song if he did. But, this is the song that really made me realize, geez, Jimmy's been working. He's been working hard at this. This is his second album in 1974. As you said, he did, 100+ shows this year. He's pretty exhausted.
Yeah. But that line, it cleans me out and then I can move on. That's another little Buffett chillax wisdom. But it's the same as, with the Bend a Little, he went to Paris.
Yeah, a little bit. Paradigm. But I can also see that being a very important notion of I'm having a rough time. I go back to Key West and I heal, right?
Yeah.
That's another mark of Key West is starting to... Key West obviously means a ton to Jimmy at this point in his career, and it is starting to take on other meanings that he didn't necessarily ascribe to it initially.
Yeah, I marked that I think of this as a therapy song in a lot, in the sort of the same vein as I Have Found Me a Home.
Yeah, a little bit, right? It is about that notion of it is painting Key West in a different way than I Have Found Me a Home does, but it is still painting Key West.
I think there's a really complex nature to this song in the fact that you can read it as using Hurricane Season as a metaphor for touring.
Yeah.
You can also read this as him understanding that life's not just sunshine and happiness, even when he's at the place he calls home.
Yeah.
And for that matter, I think this is my favorite song on the album. I think this is number one for me.
I could definitely... I think that's really reasonable. This song is I had a similar thing where I hadn't listened to it before I listened to the full album, and then I was kind of oh god, okay, here we go. Yeah. And then it plays, and it's that's just good. It's this weird, dour song where he's trying to reckon with, being exhausted and depressed, and then he sort of picks it up.
And this song, in its lyrics, gives us a reference to the A1A, probably being where the album gets its name from. It does kind of feel like a center point of this whole album.
Yeah.
But specifically, what struck me about it is when the A1A is mentioned, it's strolling along. It's always walking, not driving.
Strolling down the boulevard.
This is it has a lot much more of a local feel. Jimmy is from here. He's not going around. He's not passing through. He's walking. He's on his feet. He is in this location.
Yeah.
That is his home.
Yeah, that's Key West for him, yeah. No, and I think that is we talked a little bit, naming the album A1A and sort of what A1A evokes of traveling down along the Keys is that's what's happening, right? Is the album moves from the A side, which is all touring, right?
Yeah.
Into this tropical notion because Jimmy is wanting to move into the tropics, right? He wants that feeling of like traveling down A1A into Key West.
Right, yeah. God, you're making me think so much more about the entire conceit of this whole album than I thought I would ever have to.
You know, when I listened to this album, I was kind of like, okay, that's fine. And now the more I talk about it, the more I actually like it, I think.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is I was like, well, the side A is weak, side B is strong, and I'm not too super attached to side B because it is moving into the kitschy thing. But now that we're talking about it, I'm like, okay, well, I can see that there is actually like a vision for the entire album.
Yeah, I also kind of think that there's only really one song on the B side that I think is really kitschy.
Is this a segue?
I was thinking we could if we were in a spot for it.
We can segue.
Yeah, into Nautical Wheelers, which is definitely the kitschest song.
Nautical Wheelers is, I think, definitely the weakest song on this side.
I kind of like it, to be honest, but
so the Nautical Wheelers were a square dancing group in Key West.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's a waltz if it's about square dancing.
That's a good point.
Square dancers
they're not
they
waltzing.
don't waltz.
They're not waltzing. Yeah.
They dance squarely in square time.
I didn't think
Sometimes in half time. Sometimes it's a 2/4 instead of a 4/4. But it's definitely never a 3/4.
So they're not living and dying in 3/4 time. Is what
No,
you're
they're
saying.
not.
But at least this has the decency of using that line and being in that time.
3/4 time, yeah.
I mean, I don't know whether... I mean, it could be set... I don't think Jimmy's like... obviously, Jimmy knows the difference between 3/4 and 4/4.
Yeah.
I don't think he's like classically trained or anything like that. So it's possible he's just using that as a metaphor to say that he's living at a slower pace than the Nautical Wheelers.
Yeah, like a mountain time, or like eventually like I don't know if Jimmy ever evokes this in his music, but there's a concept that Parrot Heads talk a lot about. That's island time, right?
Yeah.
Of like living on like the slower pace, and like 3/4 time is definitely that.
I mean, there's definitely that element to the song because there's this like laid back where nobody cares what you do line.
Yeah.
That's romanticizing life on the key.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah. That didn't really occur to me that like they're square dancers. They're not doing waltzes.
Yeah. I don't know why they're waltzing.
But I honestly, I kind of come from. I think it is the weakest song on side B. I still like it. It's still a fun song.
Yeah.
Don't like the rest of them have this like real emotional thing. They evoke an image. They tell a story, and this one doesn't do that as much. I think it is pretty clearly the weakest, but I don't know. It's still
I'll
fun.
say this: if you ever do a song that is in a different time signature than all the other songs of the album, there's no way it's ever going to win the Ain't He a Genius award.
Yeah, because it stands out.
Yes, this and West Nashville Grand Ballroom Gown both definitely, and I think West Nashville Grand Ballroom Gown less so. I think it's a much more interesting song.
Yeah, I think it's a much better
They
song,
definitely benefit from being the only waltzes on their respective albums.
I think so, but like I can't really say that I dislike the song immensely.
Again, I just don't understand why it is a waltz.
I don't know. It's kind of like this fun, like, we talked a lot about, what's the song on, I think it's on Living and Dying in 3/4 time. That's like the song about the small town.
Ringling, Ringling.
Ringling, Ringling. This kind of feels like Ringling, Ringling, right? It's kind of just like a small portrait piece. And I think this is a worse song than Ringling, Ringling.
Yes, I would agree.
But I do think it kind of has like that same effect, right?
Yeah, but then again, we both thought, like, Ringling, Ringling, like, there's not a lot of substance, but we both really liked the song.
Yeah, this is kind of the opposite, where I feel like it has more substance, but it's also a little bit worse.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I think it's fine. I think probably it's time to move on to the actual album closer.
All right.
Really quick, I want to say, Mayim, this is your favorite Jimmy Buffett song.
My favorite. The reason I'm here, really. So this is Tin Cup Chalice. I mean, I'll admit, I don't have the same like knowledge of like historical context of the song, like when Jimmy wrote it. But why it's my favorite Jimmy Buffett song is in large part due to nostalgic attachment of like where I listen to it, like, and when I listen to it, who I listen to it with. That being on the beach with friends, with the smell of a campfire and salt in the air. This song, I think it masterfully uses that trick we were talking about earlier of like subtly changing the chorus to show the passage of time and like tell a story. In this case, going from want to be there down by the sea to get high by the sea to die by the sea.
Yeah.
And then all of the imagery, like, it feels like it perfectly encapsulates the Jimmy Buffett character of, like, this kind of weather-beaten bum living his life and loving being down there by the sea. You know, we have the tin cup, you know, being juxtaposed with good red wine. We have sweetness, we have salt. It is this wonderful, I think, beautiful mix. It has such an evocative scene. Like, I listen to this song, I can smell it, I can taste it, I can see it. And all of that just comes out like a song that every time I listen to it, I smile.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about Jimmy's skill as a portrait writer, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes I think we're gonna have to get into this, that like Jimmy is very skilled at writing these like vignettes as well, right? He's very good at evoking images, right? That's part of his skill as a portrait writer. When he wrote Ace, right, we both kind of felt like, you know, you have a very clear picture of the man that song is about, right?
Right.
And this is very much the same way, except instead you just get this very clear image of, you know, Jimmy sitting on a beach. And I think part of that is helped by the fact that the album art portrays him sitting on a beach under a palm
so
tree.
I wrote about this more about the album in general, but like the cover of the album has Jimmy in like the peak beach bum mode.
Yeah,
like he's
exactly.
wearing cut off denim shorts.
Yeah. He's got a beer in his hand.
He's got a beer. He's just sitting on the beach, and there's the like dead palm branches from the cabana he's under.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a small photo on the cover. There's a lot of white around it that kind of makes it seem, you know, like an actual physical picture. It feels lower res.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, what I mainly have to say about this song is, you know, goodbye to the weird Buffett closers, but at least this is a really fucking good song.
Yeah, this is, I think A Pirate Looks at 40 is like also probably up there, but like this is like my personal pick for the best song on the album also. Like I adore this song like desperately. It's really good. It's maybe Jimmy's best song as far as evoking, like we talk a lot about Jimmy's skill at evoking the tropics, right? About bringing up like the warmth, making the music sound warm, and making a beach sound like a place you really desperately want to be. And this might be his best song as far as that is concerned.
Well, I don't think this is... I think this is slightly different in the fact that the way I view this song is it's not warm.
Yeah.
It's actually quite cold, I think. But it's the fact that instead of it making you want to be there, he's making you think he needs to be there.
I could see that. Yeah, I can see that.
There's like a necessity to the titular tin cup chalice on the beach.
Yeah. I can you know what? I can kind of see that. Like, I do still kind of see the song as warm, but like I do feel like there is a desperation to that of like I want to be there to lie there. I want to be there to get high. I want to be there to die there. Right?
Yeah, I think
like
that it's very much trying to ground you in what grounds Jimmy,
which is Key West.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely feel that. Like there's a lot going on with this song. Just sort of like the things he focuses on about like what he does at the beach that sort of like tell you a lot about why he needs that.
It's also an interesting thing. Like again, you brought up with A Pirate Looks 40 his age when he wrote these. And we think, like, oh, life in three-quarter time, living that slower life. A lot of his songs mention, like, you know, if I go to be an old man, and on this one, I want to die by the sea. Kind of like Jimmy looking toward the latter part of his life. And I think that's really interesting, because that's not really living slow. Like, he's thinking about being old. Like, if anything, that's between that and, you know, some of the partying lifestyle. Like, he's not really living that slow.
No, I mean, like, I think also, like, you have to keep in mind that, like, this is Jimmy in, like, late 20s. Like, late 20s is a time when you start to think more about that kind of stuff, just sort of in life generally. And it makes sense that Jimmy is starting to get into a point where it's like, you know, he's not really that traveling hippie anymore, you know? He has a home now. He has things that he does that he prefers and things that he does because he has to do it for his job.
He has a wife that he actually loves.
He has a wife that he actually loves. He's not gonna divorce in like 3 years or whatever. It's a very different life than Jimmy was living. He really is like at a point where it makes sense for him to start thinking about that kind of stuff. Like that is something that people do when they get to that age. And it makes sense that, like, he's starting to think about, like, well, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? I want to bum around in Key West.
Yeah.
And you know what? There's worse things to do with most of the rest of your life than bum around in Key West.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that is kind of, again, when we talk about, like, what Jimmy Buffett's music will become, like, this is clearly, like, the foundation of it.
Yeah.
While I love this song quite a lot, it very much sets up for, the Parrot Head aesthetic.
Yeah, I'm gonna live and die on the beach, right? In 3/4 time, I guess.
Luckily, I think we seem to be in agreement with the Parrot Head, or they seem to be in agreement with us that this is a hidden gem.
Hidden gem, yeah. I think I agree.
It's a fan favorite. This one.
Yeah, it doesn't become one of his big 8, and I think I might resent it more if it ends up being
if
like
it
that
was
staple.
overplayed, you would.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think because the sort of core of the people who are only obsessed with the big 8 don't really know about it. It kind of feels like, no, this is one where we get to go and sort of enjoy that quiet moment by the beach.
Yeah, I gotta say, this second side to the record, it might be my favorite single side of a record we've had so far. I think it's the most consistent.
I think so. So we talked a lot about how much we enjoyed the B-side for White Sport Coat and a Pink Crustacean, but that one also starts with Peanut Butter Conspiracy, which is a fun song, but not necessarily a great song.
Yeah.
But the rest of that B-side is very good, but it's also there's stuff that's a little bit weird about it. The fourth song is a little bit of a dip in quality because it comes right after I Found Me a Home, which is one of the best songs Jimmy ever wrote. And then it goes into Death of an Unpopular Poet. So it's in an unfortunate position.
Yeah.
Because those are sort of interesting. But no, this one is it has a very strong theming about wanting to be in Key West, about needing to be in Key West. And sort of is really effective at bringing in that sort of weariness, right? About being driven to the sea that I talk a lot about. That is really the core of what I like about Jimmy's music.
Right. Shall we move into Boat Drinks?
Let's move into Boat Drinks.
Boat drinks. I think I got boat drink fever. Beatrice, I drink 6 more boat drinks. 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 Somebody sound the alarm.
I think I might have counted wrong, but by my count, Jimmy orders 30 boat drinks.
Yes,
in that intro.
30 boat drinks. All right. Welcome to the podcast for real.
Yeah,
You hear the
welcome to
stings.
Boat Drinks.
Fix that.
Oh,
Okay, so
God.
Boat Drinks. So we got the mention of a beer barrel in door number 3.
Yeah.
One more for the beer barrel.
Yeah.
A fifth of tequila in Presents to Send You. This is our second tequila.
I completely missed that one.
Yep.
right
A
for
bottle of wine in the Caribbean.
Yes.
In Migration. Here's the interesting one. A Bloody Mary in Trying to Reason.
Yeah.
Now, this is our first cocktail, our first vodka drink. And I do want to mention, I think cocktail, equals, indulgence or recreation rather than drinking to drink specifically.
Yeah.
It's because it's less efficient for getting drunk,
Yeah.
So I think we are moving into a point here where we are getting to the laid-back nature that's going to become a staple of Jimmy Buffett's career. I think we're going to, from this point on, I think we'll see a steady increase in mixed drinks being mentioned.
I think that's probably accurate.
But then we've got, there's a lot of wine on this album.
There's a lot of wine.
Bottle of wine and nautical wheelers. A beer mention in Tin Cup Chalice, and then, of course, a good red wine in Tin Cup Chalice. So some honorable mentions to being drunk now for over 2 weeks in A Pirate Looks at 40. I had mentioned I was surprised an actual drink like rum didn't get mentioned, but he did, in fact, mention running his share of grass instead. So, let's see. Honorable mention to pissing away enough money to buy Miami, because piss is a liquid.
I guess so.
You could drink it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, an honorable mention for, I think, probably the weirdest mention to alcohol that isn't drinking it so far is comparing mobile homes to beer cans in Migration.
Yeah.
So our running total on Boat Drinks is we have 6 mentions each across 5 albums of beer and wine. 4 mentions of whiskey, didn't get a mention at all this week.
No, I mean, last week was really the whiskey week.
Yeah, 2 mentions of tequila, 1 mention of gin, and 1 mention of a Bloody Mary. That's been Boat Drinks.
So this is you had something that you noticed about wine.
I think these alcohols, they mean specific things. A Bloody Mary is frequently used kind of as a hangover cure.
Yeah.
And it is also in this album, waking up past noon in the hammock. I imagine what, the state of his head might have been in. So, the Bloody Mary, it kind of feeds into this being, Jimmy healing, trying to recover something. The tequila, on the other hand, is the precursor for getting in a fight.
Yeah.
It has a much more, a much more violent setting. It has it tells like a strung out Jimmy.
Yeah.
Wine, we move fully into it's always wine on the beach. It's wine in the context of
the very first mention of wine was French wines and cheeses, and he went to Paris.
Yeah.
So we've moved far past that.
Yeah, we've moved past that. It's definitely like wine is an interesting drink, right? We're all not to dox us further. We're all from wine country in California, folks, and like wine is like the way people evoke wine is interesting because usually evocation of wine has to do with fineness, right? With refined tastes and things like French wines and cheeses,
yes.
right? That's supposed to be like sort of like a good living sort of thing, and we see that only I think once really on this album in its mentions of wine, which is in Tin Cup Chalice, right? Where he mentions good red wine in the Tin Cup Chalice to sort of have that sort of juxtaposition of good living with sort of cheap means.
Yeah.
The other couple of times that wine is mentioned, the quality of it is not really enter into it, right? It's not as relevant as like drinking wine. So we ask like, what are the other things that red wine evokes? And for me, red wine is a drink that evokes like sometimes passionate feelings and usually nostalgic feelings. It is like a wine that makes people reminisce, right? That's the thing that people like. If tequila is a fighting drink, red wine is a nostalgic drink. It makes you think and tell stories.
Yeah, it's weird to think that the album that doesn't have Pencil Thin Mustache is like his most nostalgic album.
Yeah.
But it's a recent nostalgia because it's really just wanting to be back at home rather than remember shit that happened when we were kids.
Yeah, like
although Life is a Tire Swing
does have that, yeah. But like it really is sort of like there is that sense of longing of like remembering like being in Key West as opposed to out on the road somewhere. Yeah. Do we have any other closing thoughts about the album?
I mean, I mentioned at the top just the thing about it being. I'm surprised that there wasn't more beach bum on this than it was. That it was more sophisticated than I would have guessed from titles like Trying to Reason with Hurricane Season, things like that. I really like the. Again, the side B is just a really killer side.
It's so good, yeah. I think I might agree with you that I think it might be the best side of a Jimmy record so far. The whole record, I think I probably like a little bit less than White Sport Coat still.
Yeah, White Sport Coat is still my favorite album of his so far.
That we've gone through, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that for me, his next studio album, not the Rancho Deluxe soundtrack, which we're doing next week, remember folks, but Havana Daydreaming has long been my favorite Jimmy Buffett album, and so I'm interested to revisit it now with the context that we've built up so far to see if it still hits me in the same way it once did.
Yeah, I'm excited for another Don Gant era Jimmy Buffett Key West phase. These have all been strong albums so far. I wouldn't classify any of them as bad albums. There's definitely bad songs. I wouldn't classify any of them as bad albums.
No.
And I do feel like that's going to change.
It will.
And I think that one thing that I'm really struck by how Jimmy Buffett works the passage of time into his music.
Yeah.
And this song, it just in terms of purely what I feel when I listen to it, side A feels like it happens in the daytime, and side B feels like it happens at night.
I get that.
I can kind of feel that. That kind of brings up to me, I always imagine the last line of Tin Cup Chalice happening at sunset, Yeah. That was always, if Tin Cup Chalice brings up that vignette, then, I Want to Die by the Sea is, something that happens at sunset, right? And, that kind of is, a line of, maybe that should be the opener for side B, and Pirate Looks at 40 should be the closer, but, there's not much else to say. I love this album. I think that side B is really, really good.
Yeah, all right. Well, I mean, it's been a great discussion of the album. Thank you, Mayim, for joining us. Our very first guest for the podcast.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
There presumably will be more people we would like to torture with Jimmy's music so they can at least empathize with us. But for now, I've been Kyle.
I'm Tom.
We will see you next week. Both of us, we will see you next week on Disc Choreography, Wasting Away 2026. Play us out, Jimmy.
Wasting away again, away again. Wasting away again, away again. Wasting away again, away again. And Margarita the Bell. It's long down falls.